Your brain is running right now on about 20 watts, less than a dim light bulb. Somewhere in a lab, a computer is trying to reproduce a small piece of what your brain does, and it is burning through whole power plants to get there. That gap, between 20 watts and a power plant, is the reason a handful of scientists started building computers out of actual living human brain cells. And one of those computers is currently playing the video game Doom. Here's the number that started this story. The computing power needed to train a leading AI model has been roughly doubling every 6 months. Almost nothing else in the industrial world grows that fast, and you cannot build a power plant or get the permits that quickly. A gap opened up between how much power AI wants and how much the grid can deliver, and it keeps widening. Retired nuclear reactors are being switched back on, specifically to feed data centers. Companies are locking up electricity supply years before the plants that will generate it are even built. This stopped being a race for smarter software a while ago. It is now, functionally, a race for electricity. So a small group of researchers asked a stranger question. Instead of making computers more efficient, what if you just used a brain, not a simulation, an actual one? Biology already solved this problem. A brain can recognize a face, plan a sentence, and run an entire body on the electrical equivalent of a phone charger. A machine learning system needs thousands of labeled photographs to learn what a dog looks like. A toddler needs to see one, maybe twice. That efficiency gap is the entire reason this field exists. Getting from that observation to a dish of cells playing a first-person shooter took 3 breakthroughs, spread across roughly 2 decades. The first came in 2008, when researchers grew a flat layer of rat neurons across a grid of electrodes and wired it to a small robot. The neurons, simply connecting to their neighbors, were enough to steer the robot around a room. It was crude, and it planted a question the field could not answer for almost 20 years. Were the neurons actually directing the robot, or was the equipment just interpreting random electrical noise and dressing it up as intelligent behavior? The second breakthrough had nothing to do with robots. In the mid-2000s, Shinya Yamanaka discovered that exposing an ordinary adult cell to 4 specific proteins could reset it to a blank, embryonic-like state, from which it could become almost any cell type, including a neuron. That mattered enormously, because researchers no longer needed neurons from an actual brain. They could grow them from a sample of someone's skin. Around the same time, labs found that neurons grown in 3 dimensions, rather than flat across a plate, start organizing themselves into rough, miniature versions of real brain structures, called organoids. By 2022, a company called Cortical Labs had combined all 3 pieces. They grew roughly 800,000 neurons, mouse and human, across an electrode grid, and taught the dish to play Pong. They called it dish brain. 2 things mattered here. A cluster of living cells was working toward a goal inside a game, and the researchers had found a way to send it a question in electrical form and get a meaningful answer back. Here is the actual mechanism, and it is worth slowing down for. You cannot reward a neuron with a treat. So researchers used a basic fact about living cells. Neurons hate unpredictability. An unpredictable signal reads almost like a threat. So when the dish missed the ball, it got hit with chaotic electrical noise. When it hit the ball back, the signal turned calm and orderly. The neurons were never told what a paddle was. They were not playing to win. They were adjusting their behavior to make the chaos stop. This draws on the free energy principle, a theory holding that living systems constantly work to minimize surprise, because unpredictability biologically tends to mean danger. That drive toward order may not be something the scientists engineered in, it might be one of the most basic properties of being alive. There is a real limitation worth naming. Growing neurons in 3 dimensions, closer to a real brain structure, and reading signals from an electrode grid are 2 things nobody has fully solved doing at once. So every system built so far, including the most recent one, works with a simplified, flattened version of what is biologically possible. That most recent system is Cortical Labs CL1, roughly 200,000 human neurons, grown from skin cells using the Yamanaka method, learning to move and shoot inside Doom, using the same reward structure as Pong. Within about a week, it had picked up the basics of navigating the game. I want to be honest about how I reacted to that, because it is the right reaction to have. It is remarkable and genuinely uncomfortable, and both can be true at once, because that computer is built from real human cells. For years, the fear in this space ran one direction: humans becoming more machine-like. Almost nobody expected the reverse to happen first. The scientific community pushed back, and the pushback was fair. When Cortical Labs published the Pong research, they used a loaded word: sentience. In neuroscience, that word usually implies genuine subjective experience. The company later said they meant it narrowly and technically, but the framing had already spread. Roughly 30 scientists signed an open letter arguing the company had stretched the language for attention. Their concern was practical. Overselling a young field invites a backlash strong enough to set back research with genuinely useful applications, including living models of human disease that let researchers test treatments on tissue far closer to real human biology than a mouse. Which brings us back to the original 2008 question. Is the tissue doing the work, or is the surrounding computer just cleaning up noise and presenting it as intelligence? Almost 2 decades later, we can finally check, because the developer behind the Doom demonstration released the underlying code. It shows 3 components: a conventional chip running software that decides when to reward or punish, the roughly 200,000 neurons, and a translator layer converting signals between them. Here is the uncomfortable part. Almost all of the actual decision-making happens on the conventional chip, not the living tissue. The developer was concerned enough to run a direct test, swapping the neurons for pure random noise. The learning stopped completely. So, the tissue is doing something real, just a small piece of it. The honest answer sits in the middle. A conventional computer doing most of the work, with a small, biologically real contribution layered on top. This is already becoming a business. A Swiss company called FinalSpark rents access to living human neural tissue over the internet. Customers pay a subscription, log in remotely, and run experiments on roughly 16 small tissue cultures the company keeps alive in its lab. Their pitch circles back to where we started: energy. The company claims these biological systems can run on up to roughly 1 million times less power than equivalent conventional hardware. What began as a strange academic demonstration is becoming a subscription product, and labs across multiple countries are now working to connect fully 3-dimensional tissue to electrode systems without flattening it first. But the capability question was never really the important one. Whether a system is intelligent and whether a system is aware are separate questions, and conflating them is where the public conversation usually goes wrong. Something can be extremely good at a narrow task and have nothing resembling an internal experience at all. The real question underneath all of this is whether there is anything it is like to be that tissue. There is a case, from neuroscience, that awareness might not require much intelligence at all. Neuroscientist Mark Solms argues close to the opposite of the conventional view. That feeling comes first, underneath everything else, rooted in the basic drive to stay alive, not layered on top of a sophisticated brain once things get complex enough. The earliest living organisms were not solving logic problems. They were moving toward what kept them alive and away from what threatened them. If Solms is right, something resembling feeling predates thinking by a wide margin. And the free energy principle, that same pull away from chaos and toward calm, training these dishes to play Pong and Doom, might not just resemble the root of feeling. It might actually be it. If something in there did begin to feel anything, there is a real chance we would miss it, because we are not reliably good at detecting it in each other. In 2006, neuroscientist Adrian Owen studied a young woman diagnosed as vegetative. He placed her in a brain scanner and asked her to imagine playing tennis. Her brain activity lit up exactly as you would expect from someone fully conscious. She was aware the entire time, with no way to physically demonstrate it. A later study found roughly 1 in 4 patients diagnosed as vegetative under standard criteria are in fact still consciously aware. If a fully conscious person can go undetected in front of trained doctors, the odds of reliably detecting anything in a small cluster of lab-grown neurons are not good. We assume awareness requires specific hardware, pain receptors, particular brain structures, but even that assumption is shaky. Insects have no visual cortex at all, and clearly process visual information regardless. In these tissue experiments, when the noise gets intense enough, the cells reduce their own response to it, almost as if trying to block it out. Genuine distress might look exactly like that. So might nothing at all. Philosophers call this the hard problem of consciousness. You can map every cell and every connection and still have no way to determine whether anything is actually being felt. I want to be honest about both sides of where this leaves us, because that is what this channel is for. The upside is real. This research could meaningfully advance our understanding of neurological disease and replace a significant amount of animal testing with tissue that behaves far more like real human biology. All of that comes out of a small number of cells, sitting in a dish, playing games decades older than most of the researchers running the experiment. It looks like a novelty. It might genuinely be the early stage of something enormous. If you have followed the story this deep, You are exactly the kind of person this channel is built for, someone who wants the full picture rather than the headline. If you want to support the research that goes into episodes like this one, there is a simple, no-strings way to do that through the Ko-Fi link in the description. And if you would rather stay in the loop without spending anything, the free email list covers new episodes along with the occasional deeper dive that does not make it to video. For nearly the entire history of the universe, there was matter and nothing around to experience any of it. At some point, a small fraction of that matter arranged itself into something capable of feeling, and we have always treated that as the rarest outcome imaginable. Now, a handful of labs are trying to reproduce the earliest version of that process on purpose, on a lab bench, taking ordinary skin cells, reprogramming them, wiring them to electrodes, and training them with calm and chaos. It is worth remembering where those cells came from. They started as skin on a real, living person, someone still out there right now, almost certainly unaware that a piece of their own biology is in a lab, learning to dodge a monster in a decades-old video game. The interesting part was never whether we could copy human thinking. The uncomfortable part is the possibility that somewhere in that dish, some faint piece of that process might already be feeling something, with no way for anyone to know.